All right, we're going to dive in today. We're going to do new research. We're going to talk about how to maximize giving from donor advised funds. We have some brand new reporting to share, and yeah, we'll dive into that. Feel free to add any thoughts you have in the chat along the way. Sometimes, by the way, there's like a small number of people every time that say, "Hey, the chat's there's so many things going on in the chat." Um, it's distracting to me. Well, a lot of people get value out of it. So here's my tip if you hate the chat. Close the chat. Find a post-it. Put it over the little corner of the computer where those notifications pop up, and then you'll hopefully be a little bit easier for you. All right, before we get started, a couple things. A, we will send the recording and the slides around after the session. Some of you will still ask about that in the next 20 minutes. Please, if you're in the chat, let people know. We will send the recording and the slides after the session. Two, approved for 1.0 CFRE credits. Thanks to CFRE team, who is professional certifications for nonprofits. And thank you, Phoebe, Alicia, and others who are actually make that happen every week. It's like a whole process to get these slides in advance and get the topics in advance to CFRE, get the approval before we have the conversation so that you can get professional development. So thank you to that crew. At the end of the session, we will drop a survey in the chat at the end. And that's how you will confirm your attendance for CFRE, as well as a couple of other cool things in the survey. So make a mental note, make a mental commitment. I will fill out the survey at the end of the chat, at the end of the session. Please do that for us. Here's the agenda, intros. We'll talk a little bit about DAFs in 2025 and look at some other data from other sources. We'll do the first look at the key takeaways from FreeWill's 2025 DAF report. We will talk about some advanced strategies for securing DAF gifts because these are super freaking important and they are getting more and more important every year. And again, of course, the recordings and the slides will be sent around later today. Intros. My name is Patrick, as you might know. I'm the co-founder of FreeWill alongside my wonderful dear friend, Jenny Shias-Bradling, who I got to see this past week. I'm currently in Brooklyn. Jenny is in the great city of Seattle, but we got to go speak at Stanford this week together, which was a blast, and very grateful for Jenny, as always. Most of you know about FreeWill, but if not, FreeWill is the biggest plan giving solution in the United States, most trusted by 2,200 leading nonprofits, ranging from our dear friends in the American Red Cross to Greenpeace to the United Way to small local animal shelters and everything in between. We feel such joy to work with churches and colleges and hospitals and museums and animal shelters and conservation organizations and policy organizations, et cetera, and learn from each other. And it's a lot of fun. Also, we are featured in lots of these things, New York Times, Town and Country, Wall Street Journal, et cetera. FreeWill team is also wonderful. We have closed in on $12 billion raised to date, 2,200 nonprofit partners, over 5 centuries of combined fundraising experience. Lots of amazing people. Some of you know some of these folks, and they're just wonderful. By the way, if you ever want to come work with us, we have an ongoing careers page. So not a ton of jobs open at the moment, but just keep that in mind. Last thing before we get started, we love you. And one way we show this is we try to send gifts of some of my favorite books to a select number of people, a randomly selected group of 20. We can't afford to send it to the 1,200 people that are on the call today, but we will send it to 20. There's a book called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. The Wall Street Journal says one of the best and most original finance books in years. What about this book is interesting? It's a great book on economics and finance that is fun to read, that is really much more about the human brain than about economics. And as you think about raising money, it is a great thing to know about your donors. It frankly also is a wonderful thing to understand your own relationship and habits with money. So it is a very thoughtful book. And so take a look at that. How's your week going? We asked you a few things. Look, people are, holiday weekends are good things for people. Where people are feeling pretty happy. Sort of one of our top weeks of the year so far, so good on you. So that's really exciting. Got this whole eagerness bump, which is interesting. Summer's about to be here. Also, confidence in hitting goals, again, highest it's been in a while, so good news. I covered this in the free minute that is probably going out after this, actually, but markets are up. The markets are now up for 2025, up about 11% for the year. A bunch of other promising things happening. So we're seeing a lot of good stuff there. All right, most of you know about donor advised funds, but we're going to do some basics again anyway. When we ask you how knowledgeable are you about DAFs, core here is a 3, but a bunch of 4s and a lot of 5s. If you're in the 5 category, feel free to drop your knowledge in the chat as we go along. here in the one, what a remarkably small number of ones. This would not have been true 3 years ago. So we're starting to see some real education shift. But for the ones and the twos, I'm going to go quickly through the basics. If you're a 4 or 5, just hang tight, and I promise we'll get you some more advanced stuff in a moment. But what the heck is a donor advised fund? And boy, that hyphen, which we'll probably use a bunch, is because it's a modified adjective. So donors put money into an investment fund with a sponsoring organization, and then later they recommend grants out to the charity at a later date. Technically, this money, the full control over this money goes to the sponsoring organization. Practically, the sponsoring organization almost never goes against the wishes of the donor. Donors get an immediate tax benefit, which is the big highlight of these, even if the money doesn't go to charity for years. While donors technically recommend grants, sponsoring organizations, as I mentioned, very rarely go against the donor's wishes unless it is against protocol or against the law. Money is usually invested in this account. So instead of just sitting there in cash, it usually sits in mutual funds, or mutual funds are the most common, or other options. So the fund grows over time. What goes into a DAF? So donors can contribute cash. They can contribute publicly traded securities, stocks, mutual funds, non-publicly traded assets. So maybe you have shares of an LLC. Maybe you have shares in an un-IPO'd startup. You can do things like that, business interests, etc. Some DAF sponsors require minimum contributions between $5,000 and $25,000. Some community foundations, we have heard, have minimums as high as $500,000. But they're becoming an everyday financial tool, and two of the largest DAF sponsors, Fidelity and DAF Giving, aka Schwab Charitable, have 0 minimums. So as Ryan says, no minimum to open a DAF on Fidelity. That is true. So they're really trying to get more folks into the top of funnel. By the way, when you're a tech-empowered DAF like Fidelity and Schwab, as compared to a community foundation, which has some tech capabilities, it's easier for you to have no minimum fees. In fact, 5 of the 10 largest donor-advised fund sponsors have no minimum. And so it's easier for individuals of all wealth levels to open a DAF, but let's not get confused. They tend to be concentrated among the wealthy. Other things, these differ from other non-cash gifts. So let's say you're hosting an event or giving away things of value with donations, right? Some of you might be at the University of Maryland, for instance, and you might say, wow, for a sufficiently large donation, we'll give you basketball tickets. Well, of course, DAFs cannot be used for things where you generate value. They theoretically can also not be used for bifurcated payments. So you can't say, well, I'm going to give 80% of that donation with a DAF and 20% in cash. Now, this is different from stock or crypto. Now, many people don't know this, but you can actually use these assets for the full price of a ticket, though only a portion of the gift is deductible if there's material benefit. So those of you that run galas and similar, about all this. So what are even DAFs? Who's running these things? How do they come to be? Well, the first and the oldest are community foundations. These are independent organizations created by and for the people in a local area. Boston has one, New York has one, Cincinnati has one, Houston has one, Topeka has one, Omaha has one. The national DAFs, now these are different. These are often associated with financial organizations. Goldman has one, Fidelity has one, Vanguard has one, Schwab has one, Bank of America has one, Merrill Lynch has one. And then there are single issue organizations. Now, these are much rarer, and we won't focus on these as much. If you have one, you're likely a very sophisticated organization, or these really fall into 2 categories, right? So one would be Harvard or Notre Dame has their own donor advised fund. Now, these are extremely sophisticated organizations that often have their own in-house investment teams. So most of you will not have this, with a few very rare exceptions. Now, there are other sort of, quote, single issue organizations that tend to often mobilize around certain identities, particularly faith organizations. So there might be a Jewish community foundation or a Christian community foundation. So those are going to be the most common types there. They're also the smallest and the fewest. So we'll focus mostly on the first 2 today. Now, the last major effort to try and speed up DAF payments was in 2021, when Congress proposed the ACE Act, the Accelerating Charitable Efforts Act. It would have established mandatory distribution timelines and limited some of the tax benefits tied to distributions. As of now, no new federal DAF distribution rules have been introduced or enacted. And so we'll keep an eye on that. But it is my view that these are not as necessary as they have been for foundations, and I'll share why later in the call. So let's talk about the critical role of DAFs in 2025. More money is sitting in DAFs than ever before. DAFs now hold more than $250 billion, capital B, $250 billion in charitable assets. This is a record high. They account for 15% of all individual giving in the United States. So this is an extremely meaningful portion. I mean, it's astonishing to me how much more effort goes into things like peer-to-peer fundraising or marathons or what have you that account for much smaller portions of individual giving. In 2023, total assets in DAFs grew by 10% despite some economic uncertainty. And according to our amazing, wonderful, thoughtful, well-researched friends at the National Philanthropic Trust, 2024 is likely to show an increase in grants, grantees, and total dollars granted to nonprofits. In 2025 will likely be the same. NPT puts out a report every year in the fall. We were lucky to share some of the data with you all, and we will look forward to working with them again on some of this. That data is always from the year previous. So the 2024 data looks at 23, the 2025 data, which will come in this fall, will look at 2024. So it's a little backwards looking, but we can also do some extrapolation. And based on the market over the last year and a bunch of other factors, we think 2025 is going to be an extremely good year for donor advised funds. According to a new report from Fidelity, grants in 2024 were 5 times greater than they were just 9 years previous. In the same period, the average grant size has grown nearly 30%, from a mere 4,180 to a massive 5,422, 30%. The more important thing is that more grants are being made than the fact that it's up 30%, but you're starting to see this accelerating growth curve. Now, one of the things we talk about when we look at growth curves is they're unlikely to stop. And so we can extrapolate that these things will continue in 25, 26, 27, and 28. Now, why did I say that? I don't know that payout legislation is meaningful or important or a thing to focus on. Because we'll talk about this in a second, but just to qualify that, payout rate is, okay, how much was in the beginning of the year and how much do we pay out, right? Simple math, numerator, denominator. Funds from these accounts do not sit idle despite common misconceptions. According to the 2024 report, payout rate has topped 20% for 5 straight years. On average, DAFs at community foundations pay out 17%. And those fiscal sponsors, right, the Fidelities, the Schwabs, the Vanguards, the Bank of Americas of the world, pay out 25%. So you actually see quite a significant jump. That's the 3-year average. Does anyone know, by the way, what the minimum threshold is for foundation payout? Anyone, feel free to pop this in the chat. Great. Keith and Ann and others say 5%. That is correct. So you have these foundations that are paying 5%, and in this big push, we're going to up it to 6%. Holy cow. And yet we're already averaging 25%. So my fear, even though, there's theoretically, economists would say there's no world where a minimum is going to lower the average payout. My fear is that psychologically, when people say, oh, the minimum payout's 5%, maybe I'll pay out 8%, you suddenly create a new anchor point and you actually pay out less because of this legislative minimum. So that's what I would be a little bit afraid of if we had that. The goal is to ship as much money to programmatic charities like you all as fast as possible. The $250 billion in DAF has already been committed to charity. It is not an if these funds will be donated, but when. You can never pull that money back. Doesn't matter if your kid needs extra years to go through college. Doesn't matter if you need a yacht. Doesn't matter if you have unforeseen, totally legitimate expenses. That money can never, ever come back. It will always go to 501c3 charities. From 07 to 21, individual giving rose 46.5%, but grant making soared by 629% from a mere $6 billion to $45.8 billion. So just enormous sums across the board. Now, during economic downturns, DAFs provide a ready reserve. They often offer donors the opportunity to continue giving even if contributions into DAFs have decreased or in individual cases even stopped. In times of economic growth, grant making tends to rise, often increasing as markets rebound or begin to rebound. And so we'll dive in a little bit more here. So first look, key takeaways from our new donor advised fund report, which is coming out very, very soon. FreeWill, this is our 3rd annual report. The goal is to share not just the results of what happened, but also how nonprofits are experiencing this, right? So our world is very nonprofit first. really centered on you all and trying to get you the best information as to how other charities across the country and across the world are experiencing this. Just as a side note, as I say that, I do know that we have folks from around the world on the call. I saw Jan from London, saw some other folks from Kenya, from Egypt. Donor advised funds, this topic and this report is very American focused, and I apologize for that, but it's simply the sort of structure of the law here that makes this a very particular thing. I will name that in Canada, so many of you are from Canada on the call, Canada has very similar legislation, very similar structures, and so a lot of this data will be relevant to you, if not extremely precise for the Canada market. It will still be emblematic of where the world is going there. So I hope this is useful to you as well. All right, back to this. So the report draws insights from surveys of hundreds of nonprofit pros, including many of you. So again, we'll pause very quickly to say thank you. This stuff doesn't happen without you, and we are so grateful for you. It highlights the fundraiser's perspective on DAFs, best strategies, challenges, etc. And a full report is coming next week. Fill out our survey at the end to request your copy. So we will send you the report. Just make a note at the end of the session in the survey that you have already mentally committed to taking. All right, so first insight. In uncertain times, 83% of fundraisers said that DAFs will be more important to their organization in 2025 than in years past. 57% of fundraisers view donor advised funds as more reliable than other types of giving during economic downturns. And 51% of organizations say they plan to increase their emphasis on donor advised funds in 2025 as a response to ongoing uncertainty, and virtually zero said they would decrease their emphasis. So you have this bucket of money, even if it shrinks a little bit, remember it's all pre-committed. So donors' economic incentives don't actually interact with how much they're willing to grant out of a DAF. Certainly impacts how much they're willing to put into a donor advised fund, but not out. More nonprofits are soliciting donor advised fund gifts. So every year we've included the question, do you actively solicit or promote DAFs currently? The number of fundraising answers, yes, has steadily increased. So in 2023, it was 46%. Excuse me. In 2024, it's 58%. And in 2025, it's almost 2/3. This is a really big deal. So we're starting to see this ongoing increase, and we have no sense that this is slowing down. Right? So you see 2023, not that long ago, feels like a long time ago, not that long ago, already an almost 50% increase across the board. So top fundraising priority, 83% of fundraisers said DAFs will be more important than in years past, which is very important. 76% said the same in 2024. So even the folks that are continually marketing it are placing more emphasis on these types of gifts. 65% of surveyed orgs describe DAFs as either a high or their very highest priority for 2025. That is an enormous deal, right? So we probably talk about donor advised funds more than almost anybody, and we probably don't talk about them enough. Only 2% consider DAFs gifts to be a low priority in 2025. We don't really know who you are, but you might want to reconsider that if you don't mind. Let me make a fair point here. If you are in that category, it is possible that you are only grant funded from institutions and governments, and so that would be a fair reason. If you don't have a lot of individual donors, that 2% is totally legitimate in their feelings. All right, insight number 4. One of the hardest things is that people don't know who has a donor advised fund. In our 2025 survey, 59% of fundraisers said this was their very biggest obstacle when raising gifts in the previous year, which is basically the same as 2023, but a significant jump from 2022 when only 30% named this as their top issue, right? So this is a big issue. You can see here, we said, hey, what are you struggling with DAFs? Top list. 27% say I get too many anonymous DAF donations. 23% said I don't know how to ask. 23% also said something else. And 6% said I have trouble processing these. So processing, not a big issue. Active promotion makes an enormous difference. We are showing you a picture of an elephant to emphasize what a big difference it makes. In fact, a smaller elephant shows some contrast here. 64% of nonprofits said they are actively promoting or soliciting DAF gifts in 2024. Among these organizations, only 1% reported receiving no gifts, right? So here's a giant genius insight. You don't get what you don't ask for. In contrast, 36% of not promoting, 14% of them received no DAF gifts at all, and about a quarter received just between 1 and 5. So breakthrough, ask for them. Here's what that looks like. If you are actively soliciting or promoting DAF gifts, 19% of you get more than 100. These are a big deal, right? We talked about them being averaging $4,000 plus. So we're talking about $500,000 if you get more than 100. 21 to 50, big chunks here, 51 to 100, et cetera. So obviously this depends on the size of your organization, but this really matters. Now let's take a look at the folks who are not actively promoting. Sorry to say here, much smaller percentage getting more than 100, and a lot of people getting none, and a lot of people getting 1 to 5. Okay, so let's just, if you are in this category of not promoting, which is roughly a third of you, think about being more proactive here. We'll talk about some very particular ways to do so. So let's talk about some advanced strategies for securing DAF gifts. So the first thing, right, this is probably an intermediate strategy and not quite an advanced strategy, but these non-cash gifts are incredibly important. You want to have these on your donate page. So let me just walk you through the thing that makes me quite sad. A nonprofit will spend an enormous amount of time writing a fundraising appeal email. And you wrote it maybe, right? And your boss looked at it and your ED signed off on it, and maybe your general counsel took a look too. Put all this effort. Your designer picked the perfect graph, made sure all the links work, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go to your donate page and it says give $25, $50, or $100 or other. And someone who has a bunch of means says, okay, you asked me for $50, I will give you $50. And what didn't happen is they didn't say, oh, you asked me for a donor advised fund grant, where, by the way, I have $200,000 sitting and I could have given you $10,000. So we're basically shooting ourselves in the metaphorical foot when we do this. You can see here as a counterexample, our dear friends at Help Save Tibet, where they have other ways to donate: donor advised funds, IRAs, stock, crypto, give one time, give monthly, et cetera. Now, I received an email this weekend, maybe over Friday, and I apologize that I don't have top of mind who sent it, but that person may be on the call, so shout me out. And they said, look, we want to do this. We occasionally get feedback that best practices on websites is have only one ask, right? Only ask for one thing. And the counter thing I would tell you is a couple of things. One, you already have several ways to pay on your excuse me, your checkout page. You have checks, right? You have cash, you have credit cards. You often have here, you have one time, you give monthly, you have different donation amounts. You're already asking for multiple things. The ask isn't, should I say $50 or $75? The ask is, can you contribute to this really important cause? It's not contribute or volunteer. It's not volunteer or contribute or vote, right? Or join the board. It's give. And now we're giving them different avenues, right? Those of you that have Venmo and credit cards and checks, these are all already different ways to give. Let's not eliminate the ways where we're actually going to get the big gifts that actually help us achieve our goals. So it's a really important point. Thank you for whoever sent me that email. I'm really glad to include it. Number two, be ready to ask for support. Again, there is a $250 billion sitting in donor advised funds already set aside for charitable giving. These are significantly less common in 2008, but they will be a boon to organizations who market these gifts in 2025 if there is economic uncertainty. I will say that since 2 months, month and a half since we did our extreme emergency what to do during a recession webinar, things have really improved from a financial standpoint. And right now, the odds of the US being in a recession in 2025 is much lower than it was a month ago. So, but still, it's sort of roughly in good times and bad times, donor advised funds are the right thing to ask for. In surveys and major donor conversations, please ask if the individual has a donor advised fund. If they do, you would like to engage and steward them with major donors. Remember, if you get a gift of $500 from a donor advised fund, there's a very likely chance that there's a lot more money sitting in that fund. So we should circle that person in our database. Again, metaphorically, don't write on your computers, and then follow up with them and potentially even assign a major giving officer to them. For any organizations who have been affected or anticipate being affected by federal funding cuts, you can try this language. If you're interested in how to help at this moment, your donor advised fund could bridge the gap in our funding, making sure that core programs continue uninterrupted while we navigate these challenging times. Strategy 3, your former board members are a boon of donor advised fund holders. They fit the demographic, the psychographic, the behavioral trends of the DAF donors. Make a list of past board members, call to check in on them, and then make sure to ask if they have donor advised funds. This is, by the way, obviously also true of your current board members. Strategy 4, Ask about beneficiary designations. Many donors do not have beneficiary designations for their donor advised fund. What is a beneficiary designation? It means if they pass away, either that money goes to an organization or it goes to a follow-on custodian or follow-on decision maker who will then make these gifts. These are often very strong legacy prospects because we know they're philanthropic, engaged, and strategic. And so not only can we talk about them about their beneficiary designations for their DAFs, which will have some money, but also we can talk to them about larger plan gifts, which will obviously be much larger than what's sitting in their donor advised fund account. Many DAF sponsors, as I mentioned, also allow donors to name successor advisors or charities to remain the funds. This is a very important thing. It's just another way to deepen the conversation around donor advised funds as well. Here's what you can actually say. Some people say, I don't know how to talk about these things, especially legacy giving. You see, I saw the names of a bunch of really smart plan giving folks on the call, and you all might have more experience with this, but other folks might not. So here's some suggested language. One thing I've seen is that many of our donors forget to add beneficiary designations. You may have already thought of this, but just in case I wanted to raise it, would you like me to talk through some of the options? You can imagine how gentle this sounds, right? Other people forget this. You're probably already on top of it, but just in case, I wanted to raise it as a kind thing to you, right? So very helpful. Anna says she's screenshotting this. Anna, go for it, but reminder, I will send you the slides later today. Strategy 5. Most people don't know, or many people don't know, that recurring gifts are an option. So most DAF donors choose to give multiple times throughout the year, but they don't know that you can give more than you can give on automatic repeat. Research by the Philanthropy Roundtable of the major national DAF sponsors found typical DAF donor distributes 12 grants per year. And these are really meaningfully engaged donors. It's another reason to follow up on anyone you see as a DAF. One of the biggest barriers to even more impact is that we have less certainty than ever about how much funding we'll have to continue X. Many people, now we're framing this as other people, choose to make a recurring gift from their donor advised fund because it allows us to plan ahead and make the most of your donations. And you can always cancel it if you change your mind. So what are we doing here? One is we're not just saying, hey, make a recurring gift. We're giving the big why a recurring gift is helpful. The big why is it allows us to plan ahead and make the most of your donations. And everybody if you said, hey, would you like me to make the most of your donations? You'd say, of course, yes. If I say, well, now there's a way to make the most of your donations, a recurring gift helps us plan ahead and do so. That's a really good example. And you can always cancel if you change your mind. Again, really big opportunity here. The donor still feels in control even if they make this recurring gift, right? So they still have the option. But of course, we know from scientific research, people are much less likely to opt out than they are to opt in. So once we have that, it's a very strong way to generate lots of gifts. Bonus strategy, promote DAF gifts all year long. So DAF giving tends to increase at end of year alongside much other major giving, but it's less likely you'll receive DAF gifts at year end without promoting these gifts earlier in the year, right? Remember how new these DAF gifts are to most organizations. They're newer to donors who don't think about philanthropic giving all the time. Most of these DAFs, by the way, were set up by financial advisors, not necessarily by the donor themselves. Financial advisor says, hey, we could sell some of this highly appreciated stock, put into a donor advised fund. That will help you with your giving. The financial advisor does get a pretty small, but still a significant fee for managing that money. So they're incentivized to do it. And what it means is, it's sort of this call and response. And so the individual donor might not be super on top of it. So we have to continue to educate our donors about DAF giving across the board. 74% of the smart gifts are stock, crypto, IRA giving called qualified charitable distributions, and donor advised funds went to partners who sent at least one campaign or piece of outreach earlier in the year. So we have to prime the pump here, right? If you haven't done it already, and I know it's already the unofficial start of summer, think about June, July, August as doing that intro to smart giving, so then you can really land the plane at the end of the year. With FreeWill, just a very quick plug from our friends at the marketing team, you can actually do this where you can sort of combine all these smart gifts, right? So stocks and donor advice from the QCDs, and you can actually give from a DAF right on your donate page, just like a PayPal button. So pretty interesting there. You can see our friends over at Susan G. Komen They have a link here on their website, which is very smart. It's no accident that they are some of the best fundraisers on the planet. So thank you for those folks. And then you can have sort of a seamless flow in recommending a DAF grant. Also, you get the information immediately. So this is a big win here. Again, making gifts without navigating away from the page, and obviously a ton of sort of information on the back end, as well as a lot of marketing support. So some of you have said, what we need more than anything is ways to reach out to folks, whether it's brochures or posters or postcards or emails. A lot of this goes in there as well. All right, let's go back to our educational component. The best way to be exceptional at DAFs. This is a really important point that I think gets overlooked in common DAF discussions. The best way to be good at DAFs is to remember that in 2024, 2/3 of contributions to donor advised funds were in the form of non-cash assets. This is typically in the form of stock, mutual funds, those are the biggies, cryptocurrency, much smaller, but still relevant. And those of you that follow Bitcoin saw that it passed $110,000 for the first time this week. So more money there as well. National donor advised funds in particular, so the Fidelities, the Vanguards, the Schwabs of the world, make it easier, most likely easier than you, to contribute non-cash gifts, which is largely responsible for their growth. We know from research that accepting and promoting non-cash gifts is the #1 thing that is correlated with exceptional revenue growth in a nonprofit. So it's no accident the people that are most focused on this are growing the fastest, right? So Fidelity's DAF has grown faster than any nonprofit. Now, a lot of the money obviously filters into programmatic nonprofits, but it's that they are sort of hell-bent on making it as easy as possible to give non-cash assets, and that's why so much money is going in there. If your nonprofit can make it easy for your donors to give tax-smart gifts, especially gifts of stock, many will skip the donor advised fund and they'll go directly to you. So those of you that say, oh, I really wish we had this money earlier, here's my challenge to you. Make it as easy to give stock to you as it is to a DAF, and then donors will do it, right? They want the impact. They're not, donors don't sit here and be like, what I really want to do is change the world in 2031. But it's just the systems that set up donor advised funds that make it really easy to give non-cash gifts that then filters out. That's why these things have become so much more appealing than giving money directly to you in some cases. So your job as a professional fundraiser or as a fundraising leader is to make it as easy to give non-cash gifts to you as it is there. That's actually why when we look at the DAF software we just showed you, it really juxtaposes it next with stock giving. So if you have a donor advised fund donor, you should also remind them that, hey, you can always give stock directly to us. It doesn't have to go through the DAF, and it can be a really big avenue as well. So we've talked about this. They're reminding people about their investments and assets leads them to give more. And so if you include these in your normal fundraising outreach, we talked about making sure we're asking about these things. It has two big impacts. The first impact is pretty obvious to people. Hey, if you ask for donor advised fund grants, if you ask for stock gifts, if you ask for gifts out of an IRA, you will get more of these gifts. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Feel free to disagree with me on this, but I think it's pretty obvious. The second thing that I think you'll also agree with, but might not be as obvious, is that it increases the size of your cash gifts. Now, why the heck is this? Well, it's because the research shows that when I remind you of your investments and your assets, as opposed to your income or what's in your wallet, you'll give more. So if I sit here and Kathy McHenry is the last person who chatted, so I'm going to pick on Kathy for a moment, apologies. Although she makes a great point. She says, if you're in rural areas, DAFs are also funded with depreciated farm equipment and grain and livestock. So lots of different things you can give into a DAF. I've heard some crazy stories about things that have gone into a DAF. But if I sit here with Kathy and Kathy, tell me a little bit about how you're saving for the future, how you think about these assets. Do you own a home? Do you have any investment accounts? Do you have any checking? Do you have any savings accounts? Do you own any stock? We talk about that for a little while. And then I say, hey, will you give $200 to our organization? Because she's thought about all these investments she has, she's much more likely to give that $200 than if I walk up to her on the street and say, hey, what's in your wallet? Will you give me $200? She might say, oh, what about 50? Because her anchor points are changing, right? So the value of these non-cash gifts is not alone in the tax benefits and the size of these gifts, which is obviously extremely important. It's in the mental anchor effect. And that's the thing that's not discussed enough. So I wanted to make sure to hammer on that for just a moment. Sounds good? Sorry, Kathy. Thank you for being the opposite side of that conversation for a moment. Okay, so a couple things. We're going to dive in. Thank you, Kathy. You were a great volunteer. We are, I think, who is it today? I think my dear friend and colleague Kara is going to be dropping a survey in the chat. So let's see if that's correct. I could be wrong. It could be Alicia. Thanks, Kara. All right. So Kara's great, by the way. Many of you haven't met her, but she's been wonderful. She's really focused on her work around the new AI grant assistant tool, which is unbelievable. So click on that link. Thank you, Kara. But Kara's been a real boon to FreeWill, and we're very grateful for her. So first things in the survey, which you've mentally committed to filling this out. So please click that now. And we're going to send a copy of The Psychology of Money by Morgan to 20 people as a gift. Make a note, include your address if there's a space for it. Although in some cases, we are just sending you sort of paid for links so you can fill it out yourself. Makes our lives a lot easier. Second, in the survey, this is how you will get the FreeWill DAF report. This is insights for hundreds of nonprofits. Excuse me, it's allergy season in New York. Insights from hundreds of nonprofits, including looking at different sectors. So if you are thinking, okay, but what does this mean for hospitals? What does this mean for higher ed? What does this mean for environment groups? You'll see a lot of data there, and that can be quite useful. So please, please, please let me know if you would like to receive a copy of that. I think it'll be helpful. And with that, I will tell you that June 10th, in 2 weeks, we are going to do another deep dive on using AI to level up your fundraising. Why do we talk about this so much? It's because the advancements in AI are happening so fast that every few months there are new opportunities and challenges and things that you absolutely have to be aware of, right? And in many cases, someone on your team is already doing this, but you might not. And so we want to make sure that you have the best information, as well as the best ethical frameworks, right? And internal processes to use here. So June 10th, 12 p.m. Eastern time, same time, 2 weeks from now, using AI to level up your fundraising in 2025. I will make a mental note that we will have a heavy metal song at the request of Sarah and others to start that call with. So if you don't like that, please feel free. We got some other requests for 80s rap and other things in the future. I have to say, I am stunned at how many heavy metal fans are on this call. I'm just going to say that's one of my big surprises leading this call. Kim B. Strong says Appalachian Mountain Music. And Wallace says he would love to join, but he will be on his 30th anniversary cruise to the Bahamas. So happy anniversary, Wally Lee, of the great state of Pennsylvania. We will be thinking of you. And hey, if you and your spouse want to call in on your 30th anniversary cruise, I'm sure they will love it. So, by the way, if anyone's curious and wants to poke around, the website we use for AI music is called Suno, S-U-N-O. So go check that out. But we are ending a little bit early today, which I think is fine. We've covered a ton. Everyone has a lot to think about. You can hear my voice is going, so we're not going to make another 15 minutes anyway. So what I will say here is just an enormous thank you for being here. I mean, we are sitting, as we often talk about, at the sort of different parts of the mountain of three enormous changes happening in the nonprofit landscape. Obviously, AI, which we're talking about 2 weeks, the great wealth transfer, which we've talked about a ton, and the rise of donor advised funds and non-cash gifts. And all of these things are changing the way that giving works, changing the way your job works. And so we're just so grateful to be able to sort of help navigate this with you, learn from each other, and actually have a lot of fun doing it. So thank you again to Phoebe, who put a lot of this together, but is currently stuck in travel in Dallas. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Alicia, for setting this up. Thank you for many other folks as well. Christina, who's helped out with a lot of the slides and design. Thank you, Jenny, for being a great co-CEO. And we will talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful short week and can't wait to see you in 2 weeks.